We're here at Thorntons today with Emma Conway. Emma, you're an associate here. Excited, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Kind of one of the main reasons why I reached out is because people are really excited and want to learn more about the First Home Fund in Scotland. So thank you for taking the time to go through this. We've prepared some questions to really get into the nitty gritty of the First Home Fund. Emma, do you want to say a little bit about what you do here at Thorntons?
Yes, so as I say, my name's Emma. I'm one of the associates and I specialise in commercial property, but I do have a background in residential property. I haven't practiced for around 10 years in the local area, as well as Edinburgh and in Fife. So over the years, I've assisted clients with their home purchases, sales, transfers, remortgages, and more recently, and I work towards the commercial property. So I specialise in helping businesses develop their properties as well. For example, purchasing industrial units, hotels, bars, restaurants. So anything property, that's what we do.
Amazing. Well, you sound like the real expert. So we actually met at a kind of property networking event out of the blue.
We did, yes.
And a couple of days before then, I'd posted some stuff on TikTok and social media in general about the First Home Fund. And I said, look, I've got all these people who are kind of interested in the First Home Fund. They're a bit confused in what it is. I said, can you help? So thank you again for coming on. So we're going to ask some questions that, one, I've maybe been asked myself, and two, just general things about schemes that the government have come out with, and just kind of the process and the pros and cons of the First Home Fund. So we'll get into it, is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely, fire away.
Perfect. So for anyone who's never heard of a shared equity scheme before, what does that actually mean in plain English?
So really what it is effectively, this is where your purchasers will obtain a mortgage for a property as standard practice. Very few purchasers are able to do so just from cash alone. But as we know, one of the common challenges is obtaining that almighty deposit. It's very difficult to save. So what the government scheme does is allows people to take a loan of up to £10,000, and this is government money, and they invest that into the property. So the buyer will be the owner of the property, but they will have two loans. One will be the mortgage and the other one will be to the Scottish Government. But it will look different from a typical day-to-day mortgage where there's no monthly repayments and it's interest-free. But instead the government will have an interest in the property, and that will be secured over that, again in the same way that a high street mortgage lender would do as well. So the two would run together.
Okay, perfect. It's not the first time we've had these schemes, right? So I think actually back in 2016, me and my wife, we used the lift scheme to buy our house in Dundee, and it was good. Like, I don't really have any complaints about it. So fair enough, these schemes, it's not, the First Home Fund is not the first one. So it is kind of, whilst it's new, it's good that, there's been help in the past from the Scottish Government. So next question, we've just had a major announcement. The Scottish Government new First Homes Fund is opening. They said this month, they said the end of June. It's literally the 22nd of June, 23rd of June today.
23rd, yep,
so,
and there's still nothing, unfortunately. Still nothing. Check this morning.
They could be announcing it as we're doing this, who knows? But we're literally just waiting to see when they announce it. But can we maybe go into a wee bit more detail about the First Homes Fund and kind of what's the headline there?
So the main part is, it's an excellent part that has been now announced, and it was very popular in previous years. So this, I say, is just given the opportunities for first-time buyers to get onto the property ladder. It is such a challenge to do, particularly with the economic circumstances of a lot of people. There is the affordability there, but having that deposit is that challenge. So that just gives those first-time buyers who have worked hard, who are saving as best they can, just that little boost to get onto the property market and do so faster than they perhaps would be if they were saving on their own.
So Emma, there's been a number of those schemes now in Scotland for over the few years. From a solicitor's point of view, like, how have those schemes affected the market?
So we do definitely see an increase in interest from buyers. The most recent one was 2019 to 2022, which was a very busy time in the market anyway. So it definitely does allow for more buyers to come forward, and again at an earlier position than they would have necessarily been able to. But we find because the government have released only a certain amount of funds at a particular time, it doesn't create any, overwhelming rush. So it does still mean that there is very much an availability of properties and allows purchasers to move forward with the one that they have decided to go for.
Perfect, yeah. I mean, COVID was a busy time
it
already,
was,
so it's hard to judge.
Absolutely. I think any conveyancer will probably talk about it with a slight twitch in their eye. It was a very busy time, and it was just, we had never seen anything like that. It was just bonkers, I think is the only way to describe it.
Yeah.
But it was an exciting time. It was new for everybody, adapting to working from home, and obviously your clients were from home and practicing in a very non-traditional sense as to where we had been based in an office. So it was, and then throwing in the first home fund as well, very busy. But we all got through it, and it was a pleasure to do it.
So Emma, let's get into the nitty-gritty of the first home fund, which is kind of what people want to hear. It offers £10,000. I believe it's up to £10,000, but you can comment on that in a second. It sounds great, but how does it actually work, like mechanically? Like if we could, maybe between us, I know a bit about it as much as a mortgage advisor maybe could so far. We could walk through it step by step. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Great.
Cool. So far, I mean, we've had some stuff from the government that they've released, and in terms of speaking to a mortgage advisor, people have been like, hey, maybe I could just apply for the first home fund and get a house, right? That's not the case. You do need to be going through the process of getting a mortgage application. The first home fund is not a mortgage application, so you need to speak to a mortgage advisor. I'm a nice one, but there's lots of different mortgage advisors all over the place. So that really is one of the first steps. Obviously the application would then go into a lender, your mortgage application, but with that kind of comes alongside the first home fund with the application to the Scottish Ministers. That's what we're waiting on opening and waiting for details for. Maybe Emma, you could talk a little bit about how it worked in the previous one, because we're expecting it to be similar.
We do. It would be very unusual for it to be vastly different, and certainly for the documentation, but full caveat, they haven't released it to us yet, so we don't know exactly what is going to come. But talking from the point of the previous schemes, we would anticipate that, yes, our buyers will be speaking with likes of yourselves and attending to their applications there. Now, at the same time, we always recommend get your solicitor lined up very early, because there is a lot to go through before, even for the onboarding. So we want to make sure that you've then got the opportunity to find your property. So the property viewings, that we all know that's the most fun part, and getting to go and decide where you're going to put your roots down for the first time as well. So the solicitor will, of course, guide you through the property purchase process, and so tendering the offers, particularly if it's competitive and it goes to a closing date, and they will also guide you in terms of what the local market. So we always say, so for Thorntons, for example, we do have offices across the whole of Scotland, so therefore we have extensive local knowledge in each of the areas, and we'll be able to support you with that. So at the time when an offer has gone in, that's when the applications for the mortgages would then be worked on, and then the separate application for the first home fund. Now at that point, that's when we would hear from the mortgage lender and we get the offer of loan. And we would also then hear from the Scottish Minister's solicitors. They have a separate solicitor that's appointed, who will provide us with the paperwork that's also going to regulate the first home fund element of that loan. So it works in two parts, as we say. We have for the mortgage side of things, there'll be what's called a standard security, but there will also be another standard security for the first home fund. So that will allow us to prepare the legal documentation so that the buyer will be the owner of the property, and then both lenders will have what's called a secured interest over the property, and we will work on those documents there. We will also see what's called the shared equity agreement and a ranking agreement as well. So they're fairly complex documents, but again, your solicitor is on hand to talk you through each of those points and how they're bespoke to you as a buyer.
So I think it's quite key to kind of like make sure that whilst you want to understand the fund as maybe a buyer, this is kind of what solicitors do, right? This is the main thing that you're paying for, is helping you kind of navigate your way through
Yeah.
these applications and making sure that, I mean, you actually kind of benefit from these government schemes rather than having to do everything yourself. So yeah, there we go, get a good solicitor. Thorntons, good one. So that's great to know, Emma, about them buying, but what happens when they come to sell? If there's two standard securities on the house, the government have an interest in the house, how does that happen? So say someone bought a house for £100,000, say, using the First Homes Fund, and the government contributed £10,000, so they'd have a 10% share, right? If they then sold that, say in a few years' time, and great, they got £150,000 for the property, how would that work? They get more share back?
They absolutely do, that's right. So the 10,000 or the up to 10,000 is what's going in initially, because that will be based on the value of the property, the purchase price of the property. But the agreements are what we certainly expect them to run with, as similar to the last time. The percentage of equity is actually the key point, and the agreements will be in place that will narrate what happens at the point of payback. So when the property is sold, there will be a valuation carried out, and that's standard for a home report to be carried out for any property that's on the market. So once the sale price is agreed, the equity, so as we were talking in the example terms, 10%, the Scottish ministers will be taking back 10%. So it doesn't matter that it was £10,000 initially, it is 10% of that sale price. Now, we do typically see the market does increase over time. We like to see that, that's very positive, but it can also mean that it will potentially decrease. And so therefore, if there is less, that is also a possibility. So it will be the percentage of the price at this point of sale.
So the government are kind of hoping as well that prices go up because they're going to benefit. So whilst you're not paying interest, they're still hopefully going to get their money back plus more. So yeah, fair play. I think people will have different opinions on kind of that aspect of it, but whatever your opinion is, like, it's still, in my opinion, anyway, helping people get in the ladder. And whether they might pay back more of their house to the government, I mean, that's part of the scheme, and people kind of have to accept that.
That's right, yes, and certainly the agreements that will be coming through and the drafts that are prepared, they're not particularly negotiable, and that's certainly something to be aware of. So your solicitor will guide you through each of the points and what it means in a day-to-day practice, but there won't really, or we certainly wouldn't expect there to be much scope for changing that. So it will be a case of this is the agreement, these are the terms of the loan, and it's up to the purchaser if they wish to accept that or not. But again, nothing will become legally binding. There will be no obligations until such time as a purchaser has fully understood what the terms of that agreement will be and are satisfied and comfortable with it.
Yeah, no negotiating with the government, right?
No, there's
So the government has said there's no monthly repayments and no interest. Kind of sounds like almost too good to be true. So what's the catch? Is there a catch?
I wouldn't say a catch as such, but it's the same with any legally binding document. Make sure that you take good advice on that. The main things to be mindful of, I would say, is during the conveyancing process, you'll have a discussion with your solicitor about fees. That will always be discussed up front. It will always be fully transparent for the fees, but particularly also the outlays, so any taxes paid, the registration dues that are required for the title deeds. So there will, because of the First Home Fund, it does require additional legal work, additional legal documents. So you will expect to see a higher legal fee payable. It's also worth bearing in mind, because the Scottish ministers will instruct their own solicitor, who are the ones that are producing the documentation and arranging for everything to be signed. You will be covering their fees as well.
Right, okay.
So it's all of the fees again will be transparent up front, and we'll be able to discuss that, but there's definitely going to be more in play there. There's also slightly more restrictions in terms of the property. So if you were coming to remortgage in the future, normally that's a fairly straightforward process from a legal perspective. You take off one existing security from one lender and you put on another one for if you're choosing a different lender. Now, because you're going to have two loans running concurrently, and those will be ranked between them as to which one is most important, and there'll be that agreement in place, you're going to have to take those off the title and you're going to have to put a new one on again if you're going for a new lender. So again, when you do that, there's going to be additional costs. costs, you're going to cover the Scottish Minister fees in 2 years, 5 years, whenever you choose to change. And it will be the same when it comes to sell, again, because you'll have to remove that. You'll have to be liaising with the Scottish Ministers about what is the value and what is the balance to be repaid. There will also be restrictions within the shared equity agreement, we would anticipate. We don't know what those are going to be, but they are fairly standard. There's nothing particularly onerous that means that you don't have free enjoyment of your property. But you have to be mindful that the Scottish Government have an investment in your home, and therefore it is an obligation of you to keep that insured, to keep that to a good standard of repair. So you must be mindful that you are meeting that during the process of that loan being in place.
I think the higher kind of solicitor fees is interesting for people because it's definitely something that they wouldn't think about. Even already, like when I speak to some people, they're like, hey, I've got £5,000, could that work to buy a house? I'm like, well, it's not just your deposit. Remember, you've got solicitors' fees, like brokers have a fee. You might even pay some kind of LBTT, like land building transaction tax. Like there's all these extra stuff that kind of depresses people sometimes when you say, like, have you really kind of remembered about this? And they're like, no. So that's good to know, and just like make it a clear picture that this scheme isn't just going to be like, here's free money, go and buy a house. It's like, look, we still have to go through all these processes. There is extra fees for this, but it can still benefit you if you do it in the right way. So that's good to know, that kind of, don't want to say negatives, but the reality of doing it.
You're absolutely right. It's definitely the reality as opposed to a negative, and it's just the same with any legally binding document.
Perfect. Okay, well, the property cap. So they've come out and said, look, maximum house value is £300,000. So we're sitting in Dundee right now. Dundee's a nice area, but imagine you're in Edinburgh, or maybe some other parts of the Central Belt, Glasgow. Kind of limits your options a little bit, I would say. Do you think that, this is going to be relevant to certain parts of Scotland and others?
I don't think it takes away its relevance. The whole of Scotland is a very affordable country, considering our English counterparts. But you're absolutely right. There are areas in Scotland that are typically, higher market prices. So for Dundee, looking at your stats on TSPC, the average price in the local area is around about £190,000. So you can get a lot for your money, comparison to the likes of Central Belt, so Edinburgh and Glasgow. But it doesn't mean that you cannot buy there. There are absolutely properties available, but it is certainly worth bearing in mind. But also, when looking for properties, consider what the home report value is of the property, because they may be marketed differently. So some local areas will be offers over, and it's usually the home report value. We typically do see that in the Dundee and Angus area. Whereas the likes for Central Belt will be offers over a price, but the home report value will actually be higher than that.
Right, okay.
And so again, it's worth bearing in mind, do your research before you start viewing. Do you know that you can afford that property? Is that going to be right for you? Speaking of our offers over system, your solicitor will absolutely guide you on good offers to put forward, but it is worth bearing in mind anything that goes over and above the home report value will likely come out of your deposit as well. So do consider the affordability. So we do see that's where your Glasgow market, particularly Glasgow West End, very competitive, and we do see things go quite significantly over. Yeah,
I had a friend who bought a property in Shawlands in Glasgow. And I think she was like 17th time lucky making an offer, and I think she did have to pay kind of over. So a lot of the people I speak to are first time buyers, and they're maybe struggling with that deposit, and obviously seeing the first home fund, like, that's great. But to then say, well, you're going to need extra money to pay over and above the kind of home report value, it does add that extra kind of stress and more money needed, essentially. So that's good to know. And the big question, one of the biggest questions that I've had so far anyway, is about deposits. So people think, well, if they're giving us, there's £10,000, maybe we don't need a deposit, and that is the deposit. Like, how does that work? So based on what we know from previous schemes, is there going to be a deposit? What are we for the first home fund? What do you think? So
again, as you say, nothing has been confirmed yet. We don't know. Realistically, I would anticipate so. Something has to go down. For a 100% mortgage, as you've been speaking about, it's really unlikely. So we would anticipate that a purchaser will need to put something down. What that looks like, we don't know. What the government are expecting, what mortgage lenders are expecting. So, but from a legal perspective, that's what we would anticipate.
Okay, great. Yeah, it's interesting because I think the first home funding during the COVID times that we spoke about, that did require 5% deposit, didn't it? And there's mortgage lenders out there that for first time buyers, that's normally kind of where they sit as a kind of starting area. There is other things, but again, you need to speak to a mortgage advisor, financial advisor, speak to your solicitor before you kind of go looking. If you go looking yourself, I mean, you might find things, but you really want to get the best for you. Go and speak to someone who's looking at the whole of the market. So if the government's going to own, I mean, a percentage of your property, if you use this scheme, then like, can you buy that back from the government so eventually you can then own 100%?
So we would anticipate, so as I say, it's not ownership. The 100% ownership will be with the purchaser. Yeah. They will have a deed granted in their favour that is registered. But the Scottish ministers will have a secured interest over the property. But in the same way as a mortgage, you can look to redeem that early and have the registered interest taken off the title. So we would anticipate, so with the previous schemes, there were the opportunity, there was no obligation to in the previous schemes. So if they wanted to just let that run until such time as they were selling, they had the opportunity to do that. But as you say, if they want to build back that equity themselves, then there were scope to do that. So there were restrictions. You couldn't, make overpayments, £100 here and there. But again, the agreement covered very strictly what the process would be. Yeah. And again, we would anticipate it would follow something similar. But again, until we see those documents, we don't know what they're going to do. But there's definitely the opportunities I would anticipate.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Like I said, me and my wife had the lift scheme back in 2016. We bought our property, and we did have that opportunity. We never did. We just left it until it sold. But I can remember looking into it, and it did have it very clearly written out. So I do think that would be a positive for people, because they might think, I don't want to have that security over me the whole time. If they felt like that, then at least there's a kind of method there that they could get rid of it as such, and pay it off. So great. So it says that they want to help 50,000 households over this Parliament, but the fund opening very soon is just going to have 2,000 places in the first phase. So given how much demand there's going to be, what is your advice to all the people like First Home Fund, please, like, I want to apply? What's your advice to those people who want to take advantage of the fund?
The main thing is get your advice in early. Obviously, come speak to yourself and look at the numbers and what the affordability side of things are, see where they are with their own deposits. But we would always recommend get your solicitor in early as well. A very common mistake, and I think a misconception, is that you don't need a solicitor, that it's just a case of get the mortgage and you've got a house. And sadly, it's not the case. We do a lot of background work. So when purchasing a property, your solicitor is going to be responsible for checking the actual title deeds for the property. Is it a good home to buy? And does it have the appropriate rights of access? What are the maintenance obligations on that? We look at the bricks and mortar, the home report. Are there supplementary documents that we need to seek and investigate, and again advise our clients on? We also need to carry out onboarding to begin with. So you want to have that chat early with your solicitor, make it clear that you intend to use the First Home Fund or hope to use that, so that your solicitor can give you, again, a clear, transparent fee estimate as to what that is likely to look like. Again, help you plan and budget accordingly. We also have to carry out our onboarding, much in similar with your industry. We have to seek identification, and we also have to seek the source of funds as well for any deposit that is being used and where that's coming from, be that our own clients or Bank of Mum and Dad potentially helping out as well. It's common, we have to look at those. So this we really just want to make sure that we can do that early, because there is nothing more frustrating for a client than finding the dream home and they haven't done anything about it. They need to get the actual onboarding and all the housekeeping side of things. So get that relationship in early, get that solicitor instructed early, and then that way you're on the books and you phone whenever you've found the right property, and we're good to go.
It makes sense, right? Because a lot of people might just kind of guess the fees for solicitors, like, I've heard it's roughly this, so I'll just kind of keep that aside. But then if you then kind of don't speak to a solicitor until you're further down the line, and it's like, oh, maybe it's more because you didn't know about, I'm doing first home fund and there's extra fees. So that does totally make sense, especially for planning kind of financially.
Absolutely.
For that. So that's really interesting. So Emma, say you've just bought a house with the First Homes Fund. We've talked about those securities. Like, what other restrictions do you have? Can you renovate it? Could you rent it out? Can you then remortgage as well? Like, what are the restrictions?
So there's definitely going to be some obligations that the purchaser or homeowner will then have to the Scottish Government, much in the same way that they would have to their mortgage lender as well. So renting it out, again, we don't know what the paperwork's going to say this time, but no, this has to be for a main residence. This is the home that you plan to reside in there. So this isn't for investment for second properties or building portfolios or businesses. So there would be restrictions on that. But there's absolutely going to be the freedom that the purchaser has. This will be their home, so they can decorate it as they see fit. They will have to maintain it to a good standard to make sure that you are looking after the property, keeping it adequately insured. Now, in terms of the renovations, again, it will depend on what the agreement says and the extent of it. It may be that any significant works, if they want to significantly alter the property, if it's a bungalow, to put another floor on or significantly extend it out, as well as any planning restrictions and building control that you would need to look at, you may need to seek consent from the Scottish Government. So the agreements before you enter into that and actually have the drawdown and complete on it will all be covered with you as well. So every agreement will have a standardised form, we would anticipate, and then your solicitor will go through and tell you what can you do, what can't you do. And if that's a problem for a purchaser, then you can't proceed with that. And that will be the long and short of that. But the government aren't going to be oppressive to say what you can't do in your own home. So there's absolutely that freedom there. But so long as it is your main residence and you're looking after that, you will have the freedom to do so.
Bash on, decorate,
absolutely.
Renovate.
Get yourself to IKEA, get those walls painted.
Oh no, IKEA. Not bad memories there. I spent too much money, but that's really good to know about that, because I think people might think, there's might be lots of restrictions on what you can do, but ultimately the house is still yours, right?
That's correct.
There's those securities there, so you might need to check, but unless you're doing massive renovations or big renovations, then you're probably going to be fine. So someone's bought a house with the First Homes Fund, and then a few years down the line they decide to sell it. Can you walk us through what the actual details are, what's involved for the solicitor? Is it more complex than a standard sale?
So we would say that there's definitely, again, more work involved. So with a typical sale, a property is usually marketed on the open market. There will be a home report. You'll have your schedules, your photography that the estate agency teams would look after you for. And you would obtain an offer for that, and depends on how well that's being marketed. Now, when it comes to the legal process, what we have to do then is collate all of the titles, all the pre-registration reports, that will be from local authority, to allow the new purchaser solicitor to do the same checks that we did when we bought. So what we would then do is we would also contact the lender, so the mainstream lender that's got that security over the property. We intimate to them to say there is going to be a sale, how much is left outstanding.
Right.
So that would be the redemption statement that we have to get. And once that's done, at the completion time, that money would go back to the lender, and the leftover is the net proceeds that goes to the client, be that for whatever purpose, for their onwards purchase, investing in something else, we don't know. Now, with the First Home Fund, because there's that second security there, we would also be reaching out to the Scottish ministers to advise them to say, yes, there's going to be a sale, there's the First Home Fund that exists over this. We would also have to make sure that we exhibit all of the information to them as well. So to show that it has been marketed to the best of the property's ability, have they achieved the best price that is available? you as a seller will absolutely want to make sure
Yeah,
your
of
estate
course,
agent has done that, but we need to exhibit that over. And they would then communicate with the solicitor to advise, okay, well, we have got X% in this property, it is sold for Y price, therefore the balance payable at completion will be, and then they will give you that sum. And again, they will also be covering their fees for doing that. And at the time of the sale, they will also exhibit over what's called a discharge of standard security. So that removes those securities from that title, that paves the way for the new buyer's title to be clear and have their own securities if they're buying with a mortgage as well. So your solicitor will have not just your mainstream lender, but will also have to do the same for the first home fund. So again, additional works, additional times as well to be mindful of as well.
That's interesting. And just then to confirm that if they did sell it for less than they bought it for, they don't, I mean, it's just the percentage that they're paying back to the Scottish ministers and the Scottish Government. So the Scottish Government would take the loss as well, right?
That is anticipated. I don't think we have seen many sales of the first home fund from the last few years. We'll start to see more coming through. Depends on the periods of ownership. So we have done a few. I've definitely seen some and from previous shared equity schemes in the past. But the market trajectory is on an upwards.
So what happens if a shared equity homeowner would, be a bit unfortunate and maybe fall into arrears or face their house being repossessed? Does it complicate things because the government has a stake in that security over the property?
I mean, it's always a very challenging situation that someone, if they do find themselves in that position, I would like to hope that, it's taken a lot to get there for sure. But yes, the process would face a slightly different. It's not just the standard mortgage lender that is then looking to repossess the home. They would have to consider what interest that the Scottish ministers have. Now, during the process of the property purchase and putting the two securities in place, the solicitor will also be guiding you through what's called a ranking agreement, and it is a critically important document. So, by way of the background, the standard securities are registered over the titles, and as I say, it's not an ownership, it's a registered interest. And they are what's called ranked. So at the time that they go into the Land Register of Scotland, depending on what dates they go in, is where they're going to rank.
Right.
So, for example, if your mainstream lender went in first, and then, say, a week later, the first home fund was registered, then that would go the other way. But if the registration went, then it would reverse. So it's important then, the agreement will actually be between the mainstream mortgage lender and the Scottish ministers.
Right.
They need to determine that what will be the mainstream mortgage lender, that their security ranks higher. And that will be an agreement between the purchaser, the mainstream mortgage lender and the Scottish Government. And that will say, in the event that if there is to be any repossession or any sequestration, who gets their money first from that. So if they were going to then instigate a sale of the property, and therefore that would be a sale by a heritable creditor, this ranking agreement will determine who gets what share and when. And that's critically important. So that's what would be covered with the two securities. And it's much in the same way that if you were to proceed without a first home fund and you've got your security to your mainstream lender, one of the conditions of the security is you can't grant any more. So you can't go to one bank and take the money and then go, I'm just going to remortgage and I'm going to get a couple of hundred here. You can't do that.
Yeah.
They cannot secure the interest. It's one lender or with agreement of several, and a ranking agreement will always be essential and used, and that will be the purpose of that.
Okay, super detailed. Thank you for that. Emma, what would you say is the biggest misconceptions that you hear from clients about shared equity schemes?
I think, as you say, it's almost the too good to be true, and that it's just the government are throwing money at first-time buyers. It's free money. Take your £10,000, go buy your dream home. It's not. It does come with restrictions. It's the same with anyone would tread carefully when taking a mortgage over a property. They consider all of the documentation that the lender provides, and the solicitor guides them through from the security and the legal perspective. It is exactly the same. It is a loan at the end of the day, and there are legally binding documents that will impact the purchasers and what they'll repay, what they can do with their property, how they can remortgage, how they can sell. So there are restrictions there. It might not be the dream, it might not work for every individual. It's a great scheme and it helps a lot of people, but it's not just free money and a grant, unfortunately, as much as we would love that to be the case.
Someone, I can remember a message I got on TikTok, and someone said, "Do they just transfer the money into your bank account?" And I was like, "No, like, listen, and this is why we're doing stuff like this, because I don't want to belittle that person that asked that, but it's just about educating people and being like, look, it's not just free money, like you said."
Yeah, it's a valid question. Yeah. It's certainly something we get asked, when the mortgage lender and they're like, well, do we see that money? Well, no, it comes to the solicitor, and that's it. It's the solicitor that will request to that lender to say, right, we are ready to go, this house is fine, you can secure it, please send us the money, we're going to buy on X date. So the purchaser will never have their £100,000 mortgage put in their account to then give to their solicitor. So we'll clear that one up.
Yeah, that would be nice, right? Go on holiday or something with your mortgage money.
I think that makes every solicitor go, no, don't do that.
No. So people sometimes confuse like shared equity with shared ownership. Can you explain the difference between the two?
Yes, there is a big difference there. So the shared equity, as we've been covering today, is very much the loan side of things. So the ownership of the property. So at the time of completion, the seller will grant a title deed to the buyer, and they will take that 100% ownership to them. That will be registered with the Land Register of Scotland. They are the registered proprietor. We will then have the lender with their standard security, and that is their registered interest over the property, and that is noted elsewhere within the title. So that means that, whenever they want to come to sell or anything, there is that restriction that the lender needs to be contacted first, but the buyer that has now acquired the property, they are the owner. Now, with the shared ownership, it's not very common. We do, of course, see them. It's definitely very prevalent in England and Wales. We do see a lot of, is where the purchaser will be purchasing a percentage share or an equity share of that property. So they will not have title to the full 100% ownership of that property. It would be, let's say, they take 20%, 50%, even 75%, and then the remaining share will be then owned by a government body of some kind, be it a housing association or whoever. They will then rent that shared ownership back to the proprietor, the person who is in the property. So you will own your percentage and you will pay rent on the remainder up to 100%. So that means, again, over time, there is the option to then buy further shares back over in the future. So it means, again, when there's a sale price, you will of course only see the percentage that you have as well, and again factoring any rental costs.
That makes sense. Okay, so shared equity, we're looking at you 100% own the property, but there's those securities there, probably a mortgage, and then any shared equity scheme. Shared ownership, you don't own 100% of the property, you're kind of splitting it with government body, normally housing association, and you're going to pay rent on that section. Okay, interesting. So Emma, if someone's watching this right now and they think, I'm interested in the First Homes Fund, I kind of want to get the ball rolling with it, what can they do like right now to get the ball rolling?
Get the advice in early, ask the questions and seek that from the professionals. So as you say, drop you a line, get in touch, what can they do, what can they afford, and get in touch with a solicitor, with ourselves or any other solicitor in the local area. They'll be able to guide you in terms of what it is that you're planning, and again look at the budget. We can then offer a fee estimate, and I say that will be bespoke to each individual circumstance as well. And that means that you can get your ducks in a row. So if you can carry out that onboarding, if you can make sure that ID's in place, you've got your deposit in place, you're ready to go and say, and you've said, okay, you can find a property up to this amount. You know what you're looking for. If you have your solicitor in place at the same time, they can guide you and say, well, these areas will really suit that, in terms of that budget. You're going to be challenged if you were to look at this area, and again, guide you through that. What is a realistic offer? Your solicitor will also guide you in terms of your home report as well, and have a look through, are there any warning signs, are there any red flags to be aware of?
Yeah.
So if you can get that advice in early, it will absolutely benefit you.
100%. I think a lot of people are a bit confused, especially on the mortgage side. Like, okay, how does it actually work? How do I actually get a mortgage? But one of the key things to be prepared is actually having your documents, kind of for both mortgage and solicitors, having those documents ready. So ID, credit report's quite a big one for the mortgage side, and then just bank statements, pay slips, kind of proof of address, stuff like that. So get everything kind of in a nice kind of ready folder on your computer or on your phone to send in when they're requested. People are often confused when to appoint a solicitor in the house buying process. So when is the best time, and does it matter when you appoint a solicitor?
So we'd always say allow as much time as possible. Solicitors can move very quickly. Residential conveyancing and even commercial conveyancing, it is a very fast-paced environment, so we are used to the calls. But if you can allow yourself as much opportunity as possible, that means that you've got time to get the full advice that are relevant to your specific circumstances. So really my advice would be that if you know that you want to buy a property, let's say in the next 6 months, 12 months, have that conversation. Speak to your solicitor, get an indication of what are the fees going to look like, what does the quality of service look like, what does that solicitor offer you in terms of the full conveyancing package, and get that information in early. So that means that when you do eventually find your home that you want to purchase, you've got that point of contact. You get in touch and say, Emma, I found this house, I want it. And then that's where we step in. Now, if you find your dream home and it's going to a closing date in 2 hours' time, that's going to be very challenging for a solicitor to get all of the onboarding done, to look at the home report, to register the interest, to give you advice, to do that, and then submit an offer that is going to be competitive. So you will stand the best chance at securing the home that you want if you've taken that advice early.
So what makes a good solicitor for a shared equity purchase? Is there any kind of specialist, or can they just kind of go to any solicitor?
So for the most part, yes, you can go to any solicitor. And again, if you make it clear when you're having that initial discussion with the firm, particularly, again, for the fees and the onboarding, if you are looking at doing the first home fund, bring it to the solicitor's attention. Now, most firms will absolutely be able to offer that as a service. There may be some firms that don't offer it as standard, and every firm has their own practical ways of working. What I would really say for a good solicitor for you is just make sure that you get that response from them, that there's good communication. Everything should be clear and transparent. So an indication of fees up front, the issues with the firm's terms of business and letter of engagement that will come out, and that will clearly state what is that solicitor doing for you, and more importantly, what are they not. So financial advice, tax advice, that when solicitors aren't able to do that, there are professionals for that. So we would always recommend, do they know the local market as well? Are they able to guide you on that? So you will find that, a quality local solicitor will offer you a better and more confident service, and that will very much ease any concerns or, I suppose, any worries during the conveyancing process. When you're a first-time buyer, it's new to you. You've never instructed a solicitor before. You've never dealt with them, and you may be concerned that there's going to be legal jargon and things you don't understand. A good solicitor will make sure you never feel that way. You will always know when you come away with a report on documents that you will fully understand, what is that? What am I signing? What am I agreeing to? And if you don't, then you need to say that. And that's what a good solicitor will do, is they are going to act and break that barrier between the jargon to what that means in English. And that's absolutely what a solicitor does.
Yeah. I think there can be a wee bit like, oh, solicitors, like, a wee bit scared, you know, when they're going to charge money if I speak to them, whatever. But I think these are people at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
And it's a very kind of personal business. You're helping people make some of the biggest decisions of their life. So I think that communication piece is key, like you said, finding someone that can communicate well.
Yeah.
For everyone watching, remember, this is just me and Emma having a conversation. Everyone's circumstances are different. So something that we say might not necessarily apply to you. So it's very important that if you are deciding to make decisions for yourself, that you go and get financial advice, legal advice, mortgage advice that applies to you. Get it from a professional person.